Now, you might have spotted the news in early March, 107 years after it sank. They found Shackleton's ship, Endurance. It had sank on an Arctic mission, crushed by sea ice, forcing him and his crew to dare the 800-mile trip in a lifeboat to safety. Shackleton wasn't kidding when he put his advert in the paper saying, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." I think if we're honest, very few of us would sign up for that advert and that mission. It sounds like a suicide mission. But if we're honest, verses 34 can sound pretty similar. Jesus says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." It sounds suicidal. Even more so when you understand that crucifixion wasn't just a means of execution, it was a terror tactic used to suppress slave rebellions, an end so horrendous that a life of slavery seemed preferable. And for Mark's first readers, it wasn't just a metaphor. They probably lived in Rome and lived under the very real threat that maybe one night a Roman soldier may come and knock at the door and nail them and their family to a cross. Who in their right mind would answer Jesus' advert? And if we feel the weight of that today, then I think we're on the right lines. But as we look more closely, I want us to see that it's an advert that we can't afford to ignore. And to see that, we need to see that it's Jesus who is leading this mission. Let's take a look, firstly, in verses 31 to 33 under our first heading. The Son of Man must suffer, die, and rise. Verse 31. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things. Now we have to... there ought to be gasps of surprise there. We have to work hard to recapture some of the surprise going on. Because in Mark chapter 1 to 8, Mark's been trying to tell us who Jesus is. And just before this bit, Peter finally gets it. He realizes that Jesus is the Christ. Then, quick as a flash, Jesus changes the title that he uses. Jesus is God's king, come to rescue and to rule. That's the Christ. But then he changes to the Son of Man. That title there is borrowed from Daniel chapter 7, where one like a Son of Man is given authority, glory, and sovereign power over everything and everyone forever. It couldn't be a bigger claim that Jesus is making, master of the universe, both now and forever. But that makes it a surprise then, doesn't it? Where Jesus says, the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. He must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Well, that's ridiculous. Kings of the universe aren't supposed to be pushed around by chief priests. It's hard to imagine a king ruling once they've died. That's a lesson Julius Caesar can teach as well, isn't it? When you get stabbed in the back, your reign tends to be at its end. But Jesus insists this Son of Man must suffer and be killed. But he's not just teaching them that he will suffer, but that he must suffer. It goes beyond inevitability into necessity, which raises the question, why? Why is it that this Son of Man must suffer many things? Now, I dare say, if you've been in church for a while, a few of us could give a pretty good answer to that question. I hope we could. But Mark takes his time to get here. The full answer won't actually be revealed until the end of chapter 10:45, where it says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." It'll take time to explain that, to really bed it in. It takes time for the disciples to realize that they're in need of this rescue, this ransom as well. But by the time you reach chapter 10, it's crystal clear. But he begins the answer here. He has to die because Peter is on the wrong side. If you've read Mark, or if you know anything about Satan, well, you'd expect Satan to be jumping for joy when Jesus says that he's going to die. Surely that's like the boss going away on holiday, and the worker, well, Satan can get away with whatever he wants. But surprisingly, Satan is against this idea, isn't he? Verse 32. Jesus spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." As soon as Jesus begins to preach about the cross, well, Satan begins to urge him off that path. He throws Peter in the way to say things like, "Well, Jesus, you can't say that. You're upsetting your followers. Jesus, don't be so pessimistic about your mission." And that's because Satan realizes that Jesus' death will mean his own downfall. Jesus has already threatened to bind Satan and plunder his house. Chapter 3:27. "No one can enter a strong man's house without first binding him. Only then can he plunder the strong man's house." But the worry is that Peter is on the wrong side. Peter and Satan share similar concerns. Satan doesn't want Jesus to die because that'll mean his downfall, and neither does Peter. "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Peter's approaching Jesus from a very human standpoint, a worry that we all share. He's simply worrying about this life. He doesn't want Jesus to die, because that would mean the end of all his hopes and dreams. He'd expected Jesus would come in as a king and remove the Romans from power, and maybe install him and as a leader alongside him. Peter was hoping for glory. I guess like lots of us, Peter's fallen into the trap of thinking that following Jesus will make this life easy and profitable. Like flying in Jesus' slipstream. Following Jesus will smooth my way through life at work, at home, perhaps with health. But that automatically means then, doesn't it, that when things go wrong in life, it's not just a problem at work, it's not just a crisis of health, it's a crisis of faith as well. Well, how could God do this to me? I thought he was here to help. Difficulties sometimes reveal a false view of following Jesus, that actually we want Jesus to follow us rather than us follow him. That's what Peter's saying as he tries to rebuke Jesus. Jesus is better my way. And such thinking is not only ill-advised, but it puts us in league with Satan. Peter has got things the wrong way round and is on the wrong team, and that's why Jesus must die to rescue the likes of Peter. The Son of Man must offer himself as a ransom to rescue the likes of Peter from Satan's household. That's what a ransom does, isn't it? It's a price paid to set someone free. If you happen to be captured by some pirates in Somalia or somewhere, someone would have to come with a big bag full of cash to pay the price to set you free from their clutches. In this case, though, it's Jesus who pays, not with cash, but with his very own life. He dies to break Satan's power over you, to transfer you from Satan's team onto God's. But that moves us on to our second heading. The Son of Man must suffer, die, and rise, and his followers will suffer, die, and rise. Now, I want to be very careful here, because our translations of the Bible might say in verse 34, then he called the crowd to him, along with the disciples, and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. And I want to be very clear here that the must is not there in the original. It's coming with our translations, which are fine and good, but it could equally be translated, whoever wants to be my disciple, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Suffering is an inescapable part of following Jesus, but it's not an essential part, in that we're supposed to seek out and find suffering if we're not. This isn't some religion of works where the more food we deny ourselves, the more pleased God is going to be with us. Suffering will not win our entry into heaven. But Jesus' followers will deny themselves, because gain now isn't really gain. Let's follow the logic of these verses. Verse 35. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. Two options are placed in front of us there. Two options that every school child on a school trip will know well. As they get on the coach in the morning with their packed lunch in their hand, they have two options, don't they? They can enjoy life now and tuck into their sandwiches and their chocolate biscuits and crisps straight away and enjoy life, and suffer later when lunchtime comes around and everyone else is enjoying their lunch. Or they can deny themselves now. They can hold off on lunch and enjoy it later when lunchtime rolls around. Now, that trivializes it a little bit. But put it another way, the question isn't if you will lose your life, but when will you choose to lose your life? Do you choose to lose it now, or will you choose to lose it later? Verse 36 helps us to make the decision. For what good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Of course, you could seek to save your life now, to gain everything this world has to offer. That's how lots of people live, isn't it? For family, or for foreign travel, for power or pleasure, achievement or accolade. Trying to squeeze as much juice as they can from this life now. But Jesus says, is that really the best way to live? When you can gain it all, but lose something far more valuable. Verse 37. For what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Notice, Jesus and you agree. Our life is just about the most precious thing that we own, the most valuable thing to us. When push comes to shove, I think we realize that. Were you held up in gunpoint and told, well, it's either your wallet or your life, I doubt that many of us would be thinking, well, how much have I got in my wallet? Is it worth it? Currency is nothing next to the value of our life. But we can push that further still, can't we? That would still be true if the entire world was in our wallet, all its riches, all its powers, all its pleasures. Now, I've Googled this, so I'm pretty sure that it's right. But one person on the internet estimates that if you were to value all the money, all the stock, all the investment, all the property in the world, and total it all together, it would come out at somewhere near to $5 quadrillion. I have no idea how many noughts that is, but it's a lot of money, isn't it? Now, if you could fit all of that into your purse, you might still be living in poverty because you'd have nothing to swap for your life. For what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? It's simply the wrong currency. Because, verse 38, "For if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, well, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." So what if you've gained the whole world, when what secures eternal life is our relation to Jesus? If you won't follow Jesus now, if you're ashamed of his words and won't accept his forgiveness, then he simply won't forgive you. He won't be on your side when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Worse, he'll be ashamed of you. And all our gain then will be really rather embarrassing. What good will it do you? What can you give to Jesus to change his mind at that point? Will you try and persuade him with all the wealth that you've gained, a wealth that he made in his world? Could you offer him the life that he graciously gave you in the first place? Will you tell him how high you've climbed on the career ladder and why he, as King of the universe, should listen to you? Gain now isn't really gain, because nothing we can gain, no status, no wealth, no works, can be swapped for 1 second of life. When we meet with Jesus, we will give an account of our life to him, which means that gain now isn't really gain, and it also means that loss now isn't really loss. Following Jesus will be hard work. There is nothing pleasant about denying yourself, taking up your cross and following him. When Jesus says that, he's not talking about denying yourself chocolate when it comes round to Lent, nor is he talking about wearing a little cross-shaped necklace. It means suffering and even death. Following in Jesus' bloodied footprints as he carries his own crossbeam to his own execution. If you follow Jesus, you might be bullied. If you follow Jesus, you might be imprisoned. You might be killed. Brothers and sisters around the world are facing that daily. You might have to leave behind home or family or friends. It might cost you your job. Just this last week, I was hearing of one man who has been fired because he's following Jesus. It will cost you dearly to serve the church family faithfully. It hurts to hack off the sins which entangle us. It hurts to put our old self to death. For many of us, following Jesus will cost us our most deeply cherished idol. Rosaria Butterfield, a lady, was researching into Christianity, and she realized that if she became a Christian, well, it would cost her not only her life partner, but her career, her house, practically everything except her dog. And she was looking around at the church and she said, well, that's not fair. Why do you guys all get to go off without any sort of loss? And her vicar challenged her. Well, have you actually ever spoken to anyone about this? Why don't you ask them what it cost them to follow Christ? And in a very tender way, each and every person told her how they'd given up their most treasured of ideas to follow Jesus. Women who were infertile had given up the idea that they could only be godly if they were Christian parents. Parents had buried not 1, but 2 and 3 children. Alcoholics had wrestled with addiction for years. It was almost frightening how much people had given up but kept on following Jesus. Jesus is not kidding when he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. But as we hear that, we need to remember that loss now isn't really loss, because it comes with a promise that whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. Jesus' promise is that if we let go of our life, of our plans, of our goals in order to follow him, well, he will give us something better. We will receive eternal life. Jesus' followers will suffer, die, and rise. And better, when we meet with Jesus, he won't be ashamed to acknowledge us when he comes in his Father's glory. He will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many. Come and enter into your master's happiness." Did you notice Shackleton's advert ends with uncertainty? Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return, doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Whereas Jesus' advert is full of certainty. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. And that's because Jesus' mission doesn't end with crucifixion, but with resurrection. The Son of Man must suffer, die, and rise. 3 days later, he will rise again. As Jesus rises, that check clears and the ransom is paid. Jesus rises to life and brings with him anyone who would follow him. In the words of 2 Timothy 2:11, here is a trustworthy saying: if we died with him, we will also live with him. But in closing, let me speak briefly to 4 separate groups. First, if you aren't yet following Jesus, what I want you to notice is that Jesus doesn't hide anything in the small print. Of all people, Jesus is perfectly honest, and you'll have to go a long way before you'll find a leader any more honest. He gives you the freedom to choose and the full knowledge of knowing where each path will lead. Which is it going to be? Life now and death later, or death now and life later? Second group to speak to, Christians who failed. Do you know what? I don't think there's been a day when I have wholeheartedly denied myself, taken up my cross, and followed Jesus. I've even failed at that just this morning. But we need to remember that it's Peter who's telling this story to Mark. And as he relates this story to Mark, I don't think he could help but let his mind slip forward to Gethsemane, to a time where he'd proudly boast that he would never deny Jesus. Even if I have to die with you, I'll never disown you. And a few hours later, we find him trying to save his life by being ashamed of Jesus and his words. He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." Jesus does call us to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. But there's forgiveness too, for every time we step off that path. Thirdly, to those whose walk with the Lord does feel like death and denial at the moment, keep going. Things haven't gone wrong, and it won't be for long. We will soon be with the Lord. Fourthly and finally, it might be that if you're a Christian and I've spoken to you and you've been convinced that this is right, and the Lord has maybe been putting it on your heart that following him will mean denying yourself in a particular way, denying yourself a cherished sin or a selfish pursuit, or even you've been convinced to take up your cross in service or in evangelism, in sharing the gospel for you. I just want to pray that the Lord would sustain you as you walk along that path, as you follow him. So let's do that together now, shall we?